It was a warm afternoon in the city, and the streets were bustling with people finishing errands, heading to cafes, or simply enjoying the sun. The FBI agent, a woman known for her calm and collected demeanor, decided to take a brief break from her demanding work week. She wanted something simple, almost ordinary, a small escape from the constant pressures of her job. With a short list of essentials in her hand, she stepped into a popular department store, thinking this would be just another regular shopping trip. She moved through the aisles deliberately, examining the items she needed. Her focus was on the tasks at hand, the familiar sounds of shoppers chattering and carts rolling across the floor forming a background hum. Occasionally, she greeted the staff with a polite nod or a soft smile. She chose items carefully, checking labels and prices, making sure she got exactly what she needed. Nothing about the day hinted that it would turn out to be anything but ordinary. Suddenly, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Two uniformed local police officers appeared near the entrance and seemed to be watching her closely. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. Perhaps they were just patrolling, keeping an eye on the crowd as they usually did. But as she continued shopping, she realized their gaze was following her every move. A sense of unease crept over her, though she tried to dismiss it. She reminded herself that she had nothing to hide, that she had done nothing wrong, and that the officers were only doing their jobs. Without warning, one of the officers approached her directly. "Ma'am, can we have a word?" he asked, his tone sharp and dismissive. The agent stopped, looking up at him with polite caution. "Of course," she said calmly. "Is there a problem?" The officer's eyes narrowed. "We have reason to believe you are shoplifting. Please come with us." Her mind processed the words quickly. Shoplifting? By her? She had been careful, had followed all the rules and respected every boundary. She looked around, noticing the curious glances from other shoppers. The store, which had felt safe moments ago, now seemed like a stage for something unfair and unjust. She reached for her ID immediately, intending to clarify her identity and her innocence. "I think there's been a mistake," she said firmly. "I am an FBI agent. I have my credentials here." She held out her ID with steady hands, maintaining a calm voice despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. "I haven't taken anything. Please check your records." But the officers barely glanced at her credentials. Their suspicion didn't waver, and the tone in their voice became more insistent. "We need to make sure. Step over here," the other officer said, pointing toward a less crowded area of the store. A knot tightened in her stomach, but she remained composed. Her professional training kicked in, reminding her to observe, remain calm, and not escalate the situation unnecessarily. She walked with them, keeping her movements deliberate and her posture confident. Onlookers watched silently, some frowning in concern, others whispering amongst themselves. The agent could feel the weight of their gazes, but she refused to let it shake her. As they moved, the officers continued their accusations, their assumptions clear. "You fit the description we were given," one said. "And your behavior is suspicious." She took a deep breath. "Suspicious how? I have done nothing wrong. You are accusing me without any evidence, only assumptions. I am cooperating fully, but I need you to understand that these accusations are false." Her voice was calm but firm. It carried authority not because she demanded it, but because it was the truth. The officers, however, seemed unmoved by reason or logic. Their minds were fixed on their prejudiced assumptions, blinded to her professionalism and the credentials she had just presented. She noticed the subtle shift in some of the store employees, their discomfort growing as they observed the unfolding situation. The tension in the air was palpable. She recalled previous experiences where bias and misjudgment had caused unnecessary conflicts. In those moments, she had learned the importance of patience and clarity. She couldn't allow anger to take over. That would only escalate the incident. She kept her hands visible, her body language open, and her tone steady. "I am asking you to follow proper procedure," she said. "I am not resisting, but you are making a mistake." The officers led her to a small back area, away from most of the customers. The space was narrow and slightly intimidating, with metal shelves and a few storage boxes stacked neatly against the walls. The agent's heart was steady, though her mind raced. She analyzed the situation quickly, noting exit points, potential witnesses, and the officers' behavior. Every detail mattered. Once they reached the area, the officers began repeating their demands, insisting on searching her belongings. She understood their authority, but she also understood the limits of it. She could comply without giving them any reason to violate her rights. Carefully, she handed over her bag, her mind running through every step she would take next. This was not only about her dignity, but about standing up against wrongful assumptions and systemic bias. As the officers began inspecting her items, she watched closely. Her eyes followed every movement, noting their reactions, their expressions, and the way they handled her things. She felt a mix of indignation and quiet resolve. Every object they examined, every drawer they opened, reaffirmed that she was doing nothing wrong. Their accusations were baseless, built solely on prejudice. She spoke again, her voice calm and measured. "You are not going to find anything because there is nothing to find. This is a misunderstanding, and it needs to be corrected immediately." Her words were firm but not confrontational, meant to assert her innocence without provoking further hostility. Time seemed to stretch as the officers continued their inspection. Each passing moment was tense, filled with unspoken judgments and the agent's quiet dignity. She noticed subtle signs of discomfort beginning to appear on their faces. The confidence they had carried when approaching her was starting to waver, though they were careful not to show it too openly. Around them, the store staff exchanged glances. Some looked apologetic, clearly recognizing the injustice of the situation, while others remained silent, unsure how to intervene. The agent remained the center of attention, but she refused to let the scrutiny affect her. She maintained her composure, her professionalism, and her sense of justice. She thought about how many times people faced similar assumptions every day, judged not by their actions but by their appearance. The thought strengthened her resolve. She knew that in this moment, staying calm and standing firm was the most powerful thing she could do. Her dignity and clarity were her tools, and she wielded them carefully, without raising her voice or losing control. As the officers continued, a few onlookers began to whisper among themselves, questioning the officers' behavior. The tension was slowly building not only in the small back area, but across the store. The agent's calm presence contrasted sharply with the officers' growing frustration. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Finally, the inspection reached its end. The officers had gone through everything thoroughly, and there was not a single item out of place, not a shred of evidence to support their accusations. The agent stood patiently, waiting for them to acknowledge what was now obvious to anyone paying attention. Her calm endurance, her professional demeanor, and the undeniable truth of her innocence had created a quiet tension in the room. One of the officers glanced at the other, their earlier confidence beginning to fade. The realization of their mistake was creeping in, though pride and discomfort made it difficult for them to admit it outright. The agent watched carefully, her expression composed but sharp, aware that this was the moment where prejudice began to confront reality. The agent's thoughts wandered briefly. She considered how often people let assumptions guide their actions, how often bias went unchecked, and how important it was to face these moments with clarity and calm. She understood that her reaction could influence the outcome, not just for herself but for anyone witnessing the situation. Her composure was more than self-protection. It was a quiet form of teaching, showing that dignity and professionalism could outshine prejudice. She spoke again, her voice steady and firm. "I hope you understand now that your assumptions were wrong. I have cooperated fully and shown my credentials. It is time to correct this mistake." The officers remained silent for a moment, their expressions betraying a mix of embarrassment and unease. They were caught between acknowledging the truth and maintaining their authority. The tension in the room was thick, but the agent's presence remained calm and unwavering. She had not allowed fear, anger, or frustration to dictate her actions. Instead, she had relied on her training, her patience, and her understanding of human behavior to navigate an unfair and uncomfortable situation. Finally, one officer muttered something about procedure, a feeble attempt to regain control. But the agent's eyes made it clear that she was not intimidated. She had handled worse situations in far more dangerous contexts, and this, though humiliating, was ultimately a matter of correcting a misunderstanding. The part of the story closes with her standing in that small back area, still calm, still composed, waiting for the officers to acknowledge the truth. The stage was set for the next steps where justice, accountability, and the confrontation of prejudice would continue. She had faced the first wave of false accusations with dignity and strength. proving that even in ordinary moments, courage and professionalism could shine through, and setting the tone for the events that would follow. The air in the back of the store felt heavy and tense. The FBI agent remained calm, though inside her mind was racing through every detail of the encounter. She had been trained to handle high-pressure situations, but this was different. This wasn't a criminal chase or a dangerous suspect. This was ordinary people making assumptions that carried serious consequences. She could feel the weight of the officer's prejudice pressing down, yet she refused to let it control her. She took a steadying breath and reminded herself that her training wasn't just for the field. It applied to moments like this as well. She kept her hands visible, her movements deliberate, and her voice controlled. The officers continued to speak, their tone accusatory, but she did not respond with anger. She knew that any reaction born from frustration could be used against her, or escalate the situation unnecessarily. "I have done nothing wrong," she said again, her voice steady but firm. "I'm cooperating fully. But you are making a mistake based on assumptions. I need you to understand that your accusations are unfounded." The officers paused for a moment, exchanging a glance, and one muttered under his breath. The agent could tell that her calmness was beginning to unsettle them. They had expected her to react with fear or frustration, yet she stood composed, observing and responding only with facts. Her professionalism contrasted sharply with the rashness of their assumptions. She reflected on the power of bias and how often it led to misunderstandings and injustice. Many people went through life being judged by appearances rather than actions. This moment was one of those unfortunate instances, but she would not let it define her or compromise her dignity. She had to stand firm, not only for herself but for anyone who might face similar prejudice in the future. The officers were still insisting on inspecting her belongings. She handed over her bag calmly, thinking through each step carefully. She had nothing to hide, and she knew that the truth would protect her. As the officers began rummaging through her things, she kept her eyes on them, noting their expressions and reactions. She remained silent, letting the act of compliance demonstrate her cooperation while the baselessness of their accusations became increasingly evident. Around them, a few store employees watched with unease. Some appeared shocked at the audacity of the officers' assumptions, while others seemed unsure how to react. The agent noticed their glances and realized the subtle tension that her calm presence was creating. She was quietly asserting authority through composure, showing that dignity and professionalism could shine even in a situation designed to belittle her. The officers found nothing. Every item was ordinary, accounted for and properly purchased or personal. Yet they hesitated to acknowledge it. Their faces betrayed a flicker of confusion and discomfort, though they tried to mask it with a forced sense of control. The agent remained composed, understanding that the recognition of truth could be slow and reluctant in people conditioned to see her in a certain way. "I hope you see now that your assumptions were incorrect," she said softly, maintaining eye contact with both officers. "There is no evidence of wrongdoing, and I have cooperated fully. I expect this mistake to be corrected immediately." For a moment, silence filled the small back area. The agent felt the shift subtly. The officer's confident posture was slightly weakened, their certainty beginning to erode. She observed their small gestures, shifting weight, hesitant glances, and the slight furrow in their brows. It was clear that reality was beginning to collide with their prejudiced expectations. Her thoughts wandered briefly. She considered how many people experienced similar false assumptions in daily life, how often individuals were judged unfairly, and how these moments could be handled with courage rather than confrontation. Her calm endurance was teaching, even if the lesson wasn't consciously acknowledged by the officers. Sometimes dignity and quiet strength spoke louder than words. The agent's mind also turned to the future. She knew that this incident could escalate if mishandled, but she was prepared. She had a plan, drawn from years of experience to ensure that justice and accountability would prevail. She would document everything, pursue proper channels, and make certain that prejudice did not escape consequence. For now, her priority was to maintain composure and observe carefully. The officers continued their inspection, occasionally muttering about procedure or protocol. She listened without responding, letting their actions highlight the absurdity of the accusations. She noticed the growing discomfort on their faces as the reality of their mistake became undeniable. Her calmness, patience, and professionalism were gradually shifting the balance of power. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. One officer began to fidget, glancing at the other, searching for reassurance. The agent understood that their authority felt challenged not by her words, but by the undeniable evidence of their baseless assumption. Every empty pocket, every correctly paid-for item, every personal belonging that was properly accounted for chipped away at their certainty. She stood silently, letting the facts speak for themselves. At that moment, she realized the importance of patience in confronting prejudice. She had encountered people in positions of authority who had jumped to conclusions without evidence, and she had learned that rushing confrontation often worsened outcomes. By remaining composed, she was ensuring that the truth would be recognized fully and without question. Her experience as an FBI agent had taught her to navigate tense situations with strategy, observation, and restraint, and those lessons were invaluable now. As the inspection neared completion, the officers' expressions shifted further. The confident assertiveness they had displayed at the beginning was replaced with unease, a pale realization of their error. The agent noted the subtle tremor in their voice when they muttered procedural terms, their hands moving more carefully as they handled her belongings. The truth was undeniable, and yet pride made acknowledgement difficult. She spoke again, her voice soft but resolute. "I trust you understand now that these accusations were unfounded. I have cooperated fully, and I expect this to be corrected immediately. It is not just a matter of personal dignity, but of professional responsibility." The silence that followed was almost deafening. The agent could feel the weight of the situation in the air, the officer's internal conflict, the judgment of bystanders, and the quiet strength of her own resolve. She stood firm, calm, and dignified, knowing that her patience and composure were creating a subtle but powerful shift. Time seemed to stretch. The small back area, once tense and oppressive, began to feel different. The officer's posture had softened, their tone less certain, and their eyes betrayed the realization that they had been wrong. The agent's calm endurance had forced them to confront their assumptions and the unjust treatment they had imposed. She thought about the lessons embedded in this moment. Prejudice and bias could appear anywhere, even in seemingly ordinary settings. How one responded, whether with anger, submission, or calm clarity, could determine the outcome. She had chosen patience and professional strength, and it was beginning to work. Her dignity remained intact, and the officers were beginning to face the truth. One officer finally spoke, his voice hesitant. We need to review this." The agent's eyes met his. She maintained her calm and steady gaze. "Yes, and I expect a full acknowledgement that these accusations were false. I have cooperated completely, and the mistake must be corrected." Around them, the store employees watched, some nodding slightly, others still in quiet shock. The agent's presence had transformed the situation from an unfair confrontation into a demonstration of strength and professionalism. Her actions quietly taught those watching the value of patience, dignity, and standing firm in the face of prejudice. The officers, visibly uncomfortable, exchanged glances. The agent noted the subtle shift from defensiveness to realization. She had not raised her voice, she had not become aggressive, and yet she had achieved a quiet victory. The truth of her innocence was undeniable, and the officers could no longer cling to their prejudiced assumptions. As the inspection concluded, the agent retrieved her belongings, still maintaining her composure. She acknowledged the tension but did not let it dominate her. She had faced false accusations, systemic bias, and personal humiliation, and had navigated it with patience, clarity, and professionalism. The experience, while uncomfortable, reinforced her belief in the power of calm resilience and the importance of standing up for justice. The part closes with her taking a deep breath, preparing to address the next steps. She would ensure accountability, document the incident thoroughly, and pursue the proper channels to correct the injustice. She had faced the officer's prejudice directly, maintained her dignity, and begun to turn the situation around. Her courage, professionalism, and quiet strength set the stage for the resolution to come, showing that even in ordinary settings, extraordinary integrity could shine through. The small back area of the store remained quiet except for the faint sound of papers rustling and items being inspected. The FBI agent stood calmly, observing the officers closely. Their earlier confidence had faded, replaced by a subtle unease that she noticed immediately. Each movement they made seemed careful, as if they were beginning to realize the seriousness of their mistake. She knew that the truth of her innocence was beginning to force its way into the situation, and she remained patient, waiting for the moment it fully sank in. As the officers examined her belongings, she kept her posture relaxed yet alert. She understood that this was more than a simple misunderstanding. It was a confrontation with prejudice, a test of her composure and her ability to maintain authority without escalating conflict. She thought about how often people let assumptions dictate their actions, and how devastating it could be when those assumptions were rooted in bias. Her calmness was a quiet but powerful counter to that injustice. One officer muttered something under his breath about procedure, glancing nervously at the other. The agent's eyes followed their every motion, noting the subtle shift in their expressions. Their earlier arrogance was giving way to hesitation, a pale shadow of the certainty they had carried into the store. She did not speak immediately, allowing the silence and their own actions to reveal the truth. She reflected briefly on the irony of the situation. She had faced dangerous criminals, high-stakes investigations, and life-threatening circumstances in her career. Yet this mundane setting had become a stage for a profound test of patience, dignity, and resilience. She understood that courage took many forms, and sometimes the greatest strength was shown not in confrontation, but in steady, unwavering composure. Finally, one officer spoke, his tone a mixture of discomfort and uncertainty. "We need to double-check, just to be sure." The agent nodded slowly, her expression calm but firm. "Of course. I have nothing to hide and I am cooperating fully. I expect that once you finish, the mistake will be acknowledged." As the officers continued their inspection, she noticed how their hands trembled slightly as they lifted each item. The confidence that had marked their initial approach had completely evaporated. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but it was undeniable. She watched silently, letting the moment teach its lesson. The store employees nearby exchanged worried glances. Some whispered quietly, recognizing the unfairness of the situation. Others seemed unsure, caught between loyalty to their jobs and the realization that the officers were wrong. The agent remained composed, a steady presence in a room filled with tension. Her dignity and patience were slowly becoming a force that could not be ignored. Each empty pocket, each personal item properly accounted for, reinforced the truth. The officers' movements became slower, their expressions more guarded. The agent could see the hesitation, the subtle signs that the confrontation was no longer under their control. Her calm endurance had shifted the power subtly but significantly. She understood that this was the turning point where prejudice began to confront reality. She spoke again, softly but firmly. "You are beginning to see now that these accusations are without merit. I have cooperated fully and there is no evidence to support your claims. It is time to correct this mistake." Her voice was steady, resonating with authority and truth. The officers paused, clearly affected by the words, and glanced at each other in a moment of silent acknowledgement. The agent's calmness and clarity were unshakable, and it was starting to force recognition of their error. She thought about the many people who had faced similar accusations, who had been judged unfairly, and how often those individuals had not had the chance or the training to maintain their composure. She felt a quiet responsibility, not just for herself but for anyone who might experience prejudice in the future. Her calmness was a lesson in resilience and dignity. The officers finished the inspection, finding nothing at all. The agent stood patiently, observing as the reality of their mistake became undeniable. Their faces showed a mixture of embarrassment and discomfort, and she remained silent, allowing them to process the situation fully. She had not shouted, had not become aggressive, yet she had achieved the undeniable truth of her innocence. Around her, the store employees watched with a mixture of awe and relief. Some were visibly inspired by the agent's composure, realizing that integrity and patience could confront injustice more effectively than anger or confrontation. The agent remained aware of their presence but did not let it distract her. Her focus was on ensuring the situation was handled properly, with dignity and accountability. One officer muttered something about reviewing the situation, a feeble attempt to regain authority. The agent's eyes met his, unwavering. "Yes, and I expect a full acknowledgement that these accusations were false. I have cooperated completely, and the mistake must be corrected." The officers were visibly uncomfortable. The realization of their error was now clear, yet they struggled to voice it. The agent's calm, dignified stance made it impossible for them to dismiss or deflect responsibility. She had turned a situation rooted in prejudice into a demonstration of patience, strength, and professional integrity. She thought briefly about her own role as an FBI agent. She was trained to handle high-pressure, dangerous scenarios, yet here, in an ordinary department store, she faced a challenge that required an equally high level of skill, navigating bias and false assumptions with composure and clarity. She understood that courage took many forms, and that sometimes the most profound demonstrations of strength were quiet and understated. As the inspection concluded, the officers handed her belongings back with an uneasy silence. The agent collected her items calmly, maintaining eye contact and composure. The power dynamics had shifted, and it was now clear who held moral and professional authority. Her patience, dignity, and unwavering commitment to truth had turned the situation around without aggression. She reflected on the subtle yet profound lesson of the encounter, that assumptions could be powerful and dangerous, and that confronting them required more than anger or argument. It required clarity, composure, and unwavering confidence in the truth. She had shown that even in the face of prejudice, one could maintain dignity and command respect through calm and reasoned presence. The officers' faces had turned pale, the earlier confidence gone, replaced by the uncomfortable awareness of their mistake. The agent understood that this moment would leave an impression on them, a silent acknowledgement of the harm caused by prejudice. She did not gloat, nor did she need to. The truth had spoken for itself. Around her, the store employees began to relax. Some quietly acknowledged the injustice that had taken place, while others seemed inspired by the agent's composure. She realized that her actions had not only defended her own dignity, but had quietly taught a lesson to those observing, that patience, clarity, and integrity could overcome prejudice and false assumptions. She took a deep breath, centering herself for the next steps. The immediate confrontation had ended, but the larger responsibility remained. She would ensure that the mistake was formally corrected, that accountability was maintained, and that lessons were learned to prevent similar situations in the future. Her role as an FBI agent extended beyond the field. It included standing up for justice in everyday life. The agent's mind was already moving forward, planning how to document the incident and how to address it through proper channels. She knew that her calm endurance in the moment would carry weight in the reports and investigations to follow. Her professionalism, patience, and quiet strength had created a foundation for accountability that could not be ignored. The officers, still uncomfortable, avoided eye contact. The agent's presence had made it clear that the situation could not be dismissed lightly. She had not raised her voice, had not become aggressive, yet she had established authority through truth and composure. The lesson was subtle but unmistakable. Dignity and patience could confront prejudice more powerfully than anger or confrontation. As she stepped away from the back area, her belongings in hand, the agent felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The immediate challenge had been met, and the truth of her innocence had been made undeniable. Yet she knew the work was not finished. Accountability, proper documentation, and awareness-raising were still necessary to ensure that prejudice would be addressed and prevented in the future. She glanced around the store once more, noticing the subtle nods and relieved expressions from employees and customers alike. Her calm presence had transformed the situation, turning a moment of injustice into a demonstration of strength, dignity, and professional integrity. She had faced prejudice directly, and her response had been a model of patience, courage, and composure. The part closes with her walking toward the exit, her mind focused on the next steps. The confrontation had revealed the deep impact of assumptions and prejudice, but it had also demonstrated the power of integrity and calm resolve. She had not only defended herself but had shown quietly and effectively that dignity, professionalism, and truth could prevail in even the most uncomfortable and unjust circumstances. The stage was now set for the steps of accountability and reflection that would follow, as she prepared to ensure that justice extended beyond this moment and into the broader world around her. The store had begun to settle into a quieter rhythm after the tense confrontation, but the FBI agent knew that the incident was far from over. She had navigated the immediate situation with patience, composure, and professionalism, But now it was time to think about the next steps. She gathered her belongings carefully and left the store with a calm, measured pace, her mind already working through how to ensure that the mistake was properly addressed. Once outside, the cool air hit her face, a small relief after the tension of the back room. She took a deep breath and centered herself. She knew that reporting the incident was not just about personal vindication. It was about accountability and ensuring that prejudice and bias were confronted in a responsible way. She would make sure the officers faced the consequences of their assumptions and that the store would improve its procedures. To prevent similar occurrences in the future, she returned home and began to document every detail meticulously. She wrote down the timeline of events, the officers' words and actions, and the reactions of store employees. Her mind was precise and thorough, cataloging each moment as she remembered it. Even small details could matter in building an accurate account, and she was determined to leave nothing out. Her experience in investigations had taught her that thorough documentation was the foundation of accountability. After completing the notes, she contacted her colleagues in the FBI to inform them of the incident. She explained the situation calmly and clearly, ensuring they understood the seriousness of the false accusations and the potential implications for her safety and reputation. Her colleagues listened attentively, offering support and guidance. Some suggested specific channels for filing complaints and ensuring accountability, while others offered reassurance that she had handled the situation with remarkable professionalism. The agent decided to file a formal complaint with the local police department. She included her detailed notes, her identification as an FBI agent, and an explanation of how the officer's assumptions had been influenced by bias. She requested a full investigation and that appropriate disciplinary actions be taken. Her approach was strategic and thorough. She knew that accountability required not just reporting the incident, but presenting it in a way that left no room for dismissal or minimization. She also reached out to the store's management. She spoke calmly and respectfully, explaining what had happened and expressing concern about how the situation had been handled. She emphasized the importance of staff training on bias and proper handling of suspicious activity, ensuring that the store would be better prepared to prevent similar incidents in the future. Her approach was firm but professional, focused on solutions rather than blame. As the days passed, the agent continued to monitor the progress of the complaints. She remained in contact with her colleagues in the store's management, ensuring that her reports were being taken seriously. At the same time, she reflected on the emotional toll of the incident. Being falsely accused, particularly in a public setting, was humiliating and stressful. Yet she had maintained her composure and professionalism, which gave her a sense of quiet pride. She also considered the broader implications of the event. Prejudice and bias were not isolated incidents. They were systemic issues that affected countless individuals every day. By addressing this situation thoroughly and professionally, she was contributing to a larger effort to hold people accountable and promote fairness. Her experience was a reminder that even small actions, when guided by integrity and diligence, could have a meaningful impact. Media attention began to reach her indirectly. A few onlookers who had witnessed the incident shared their perspectives online, sparking conversations about racial profiling and bias in law enforcement. She was careful not to engage publicly at first, choosing instead to focus on official channels and documented processes. Her priority was accountability through proper channels, not public attention, though she understood the value of awareness in fostering change. As she navigated the administrative side of the aftermath, the agent also took time to care for herself. She engaged in activities that brought her calm and focus, including exercise, meditation, and brief walks around her neighborhood. These small routines helped her maintain perspective and manage the stress of being wrongly accused. Her ability to care for herself in the midst of this challenging experience was as important as her professional actions. Through it all, her sense of purpose remained steady. She had faced prejudice head-on and had responded with clarity, composure, and professional integrity. Now her work focused on ensuring that the incident would be properly addressed, that accountability would be enforced, and that lessons would be learned. Her actions set an example for how individuals could confront bias with dignity and strategic professionalism. One day, she received word from the police department acknowledging her complaint. They had begun an internal review of the officer's conduct and had assured her that proper procedures would be followed. While the process would take time, the acknowledgement itself was a significant step. It validated her efforts to document and report the incident thoroughly, and it demonstrated that persistence and professionalism could lead to accountability. The store also responded, implementing additional training for employees on handling accusations and recognizing potential bias. The agent felt a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that her actions had influenced meaningful change, even in a small way. She had turned a moment of personal injustice into an opportunity for education, awareness, and systemic improvement. Reflecting on the experience, the agent recognized the emotional strength it had required to remain composed throughout. Being falsely accused, facing prejudice, and dealing with authority figures who refused to acknowledge their mistake was challenging in ways that went beyond physical danger. Her training, experience, and inner resilience had enabled her to navigate the situation effectively, preserving her dignity and integrity. She also thought about the people who had witnessed the incident. Her calm and professional response had left an impression on them, showing that even in moments of unfair treatment, one could stand firm and maintain control. This quiet demonstration of strength was as important as the formal complaint she filed, reinforcing the value of composure and dignity in everyday life. The agent knew that the full resolution of the situation would take time. Internal investigations, disciplinary procedures, and policy adjustments would unfold slowly, but she was prepared to see them through. Her patience and diligence would ensure that the lessons of this incident were not lost, and that accountability was maintained at every level. Through this process, she also gained a deeper understanding of the challenges many people faced in their daily lives. False accusations, prejudice, and bias were not experiences reserved for high-profile professionals. They were realities for countless individuals. Her ability to confront these challenges with calm, clarity, and strategic action was both a personal victory and a reminder of the broader responsibility she carried to uphold fairness and justice. The part closes with the agent reflecting on her journey. She had faced humiliation, prejudice, and false accusations with unwavering composure. She had documented every detail, pursued accountability through proper channels, and influenced positive change in the store's policies. Her actions demonstrated that courage, patience, and professional integrity could confront bias effectively. She prepared herself for the final steps of resolution, knowing that her perseverance and strength would ensure that justice was upheld and lessons were learned for the future. Months passed since the incident at the store, and the FBI agent had remained steadfast in her commitment to ensure accountability. The initial shock and humiliation of being falsely accused had faded, replaced by a determined focus on resolution and justice. She had followed every necessary channel, documenting the incident thoroughly, contacting colleagues, filing complaints, and ensuring that both the police department and the store understood the gravity of what had occurred. The internal investigation by the local police department had progressed steadily. The officers involved were required to provide statements, and their actions were reviewed in detail. The department recognized the seriousness of the false accusations, particularly given the agent's credentials and professional standing. Training sessions on implicit bias and proper handling of suspicious behavior were mandated for all officers, emphasizing accountability and sensitivity. The agent received updates throughout the process, noting with quiet satisfaction that the system, while slow, was beginning to acknowledge and correct the error. The store also implemented significant changes. Employees received additional training to prevent wrongful accusations and to handle situations with fairness and awareness. Policies were adjusted to include clear steps for verifying information before making assumptions about customers. The agent's advocacy and thorough documentation had sparked real change, ensuring that others would be protected from similar experiences. Her quiet efforts had transformed a moment of personal injustice into systemic improvement. Meanwhile, the agent reflected on her own experience and the lessons it carried. The event had tested her patience, composure, and professionalism in ways that were both unexpected and profound. She had maintained control not through aggression or confrontation, but through clear communication, calm endurance, and unwavering integrity. The experience reinforced her belief in the power of patience, observation, and methodical action in confronting prejudice and bias. In conversations with her colleagues and peers, She shared the story as a case study in professionalism under pressure. They discussed strategies for dealing with bias, the importance of meticulous documentation, and the subtle ways authority and prejudice could intersect in everyday situations. Her experience became a learning tool, demonstrating that courage was not always about dramatic heroics, but often about quiet strength, clarity of mind, and careful adherence to principle. She also spent time reflecting on the emotional impact of the incident. Being falsely accused, especially in a public setting, had been humiliating and stressful. However, her ability to remain calm and maintain dignity had mitigated much of the potential damage. She had relied on her professional training, her experience, and her inner resilience to navigate the situation effectively. This reflection reminded her that strength often came from preparation, self-awareness, and the ability to maintain composure in the face of injustice. The broader community of her peers and associates became aware of the incident and its resolution. Discussions about racial bias, false accusations, and professional accountability emerged in various circles. The agent's experience served as a subtle yet powerful example of how one individual could confront prejudice effectively while preserving dignity and promoting systemic improvement. She had turned an unfortunate encounter into an opportunity for awareness and positive change. As time passed, the officers involved were held accountable. The police department ensured that corrective actions were taken, including formal reprimands, counseling, and sensitivity training. These steps were communicated back to the agent, providing a measure of closure and reinforcing the value of her perseverance. The acknowledgement of wrongdoing and the implementation of measures to prevent recurrence demonstrated that accountability could be achieved when addressed thoughtfully and professionally. The agent also considered the indirect impact of the incident on bystanders and store employees. Her composed response had left an impression on those who witnessed it, quietly teaching the value of calm, dignity, and integrity in the face of prejudice. She understood that these lessons were subtle but meaningful, reinforcing the notion that professional and personal conduct could influence others profoundly without words or confrontation. Reflecting on her own growth, she realized that the incident had strengthened her resolve and confidence. She had faced a situation that tested not just her professional skills, but her emotional resilience and capacity for strategic thinking. By maintaining composure and following proper procedures, she had turned a potentially humiliating experience into an example of principled action and accountability. Her focus on proper documentation and reporting also highlighted the importance of preparation and foresight. By meticulously recording details, maintaining a calm demeanor, and engaging with both the police department and the store professionally, she had ensured that the truth could not be disputed. The thoroughness of her actions underscored the power of diligence in confronting injustice and bias. The agent continued to engage with her community professionally, sharing insights and experiences where appropriate. She emphasized the importance of standing firm against wrongful accusations, addressing prejudice with clarity, and using strategic, methodical approaches to achieve accountability. Her experience became a model for others, demonstrating that even ordinary moments could reveal extraordinary strength when handled with professionalism and integrity. She also reflected on the personal lessons of patience and emotional regulation. The incident had required her to manage stress, navigate frustration, and maintain a sense of perspective. By doing so, she not only preserved her dignity but also ensured that the outcomes were fair, measured, and constructive. The experience reinforced her belief that emotional intelligence and self-control were as critical as professional skill in addressing challenging situations. As the final steps of accountability concluded, the agent felt a deep sense of resolution. The officers had been held responsible, the store had implemented meaningful changes, and her own professional integrity had remained intact. The journey from humiliation to justice had been difficult, but it had been handled with care, patience, and principled action. She had transformed an unjust encounter into an opportunity for systemic improvement and personal growth. In quiet moments of reflection, she considered the broader impact of her actions. Her composed response, careful documentation, and persistent pursuit of accountability had not only corrected the immediate injustice but also contributed to a larger conversation about bias, professionalism, and integrity. She had shown that standing firm in the truth with calm and dignity could effect meaningful change even in ordinary settings. The story concludes with her returning to her daily life and work, more aware of systemic issues but undeterred in her mission to uphold justice. She carried with her the knowledge that courage often manifested in patience, clarity, and strategic action. She had faced false accusations and prejudice head-on, maintained her composure and integrity, and ensured that accountability was enforced. Her journey stood as a testament to resilience, professionalism, and the quiet but undeniable power of truth and dignity.